With this La Nina, areas that during the El Nino the last 2 years were really struggling with drought are mainly going to start getting water for at least a year. Northern China, northern South America, Western Africa, eastern parts of eastern Canada, and parts of, more importantly, parts of central La Prairie area in Canada. So these are areas that are going to actually get some good precipitation this upcoming year, which means that they are going to have the opportunity to start working on taking care of those two fundamentals, food and water, for their people. And when the La Nina ends, it means that we have more than likely 3 to 4 years of going back to what we call the new normal, which is the condition of the Atlantic and the Pacific in the range that they are. So think of the way things were in, say, 2013 or 2009. Those are a couple of years where we really didn't have a lot of outside forces influencing our weather and our climate. And it doesn't always mean good. In fact, right now, the weather in general is rougher. It's tougher than it was 30 years ago. And weather in general, it kind of goes on a multi-generational track. So we hear how, a father will say, I walked uphill both ways to school, and the sun is looking, and it's been, I haven't seen snow in 3 years, and they think dad's lost it a little bit. But the interesting thing is that the grandson is usually having to walk uphill in snow both ways. So their father is crazy talking about all those sunny Decembers, and their granddad seems to know what's happening right now, because weather seems to change every other generation. And so it means that a child and their grandparent are going to have lived in similar weather conditions, because the oscillations of the ocean, they change about every 20 to 30 years. And so therefore, the better, more benign weather that we experienced from the mid-60s to the mid-90s is going to come back in about 15 years, which means we have 10 to 15 years of this tougher weather. It means also that water is becoming that much more important and that much more valuable. We're seeing more and more fights over water rights, on who has the right to water. And we have contracts that were established, in the 1920s and 1930s. Well, back then there wasn't environmental regulations. Native Americans weren't represented. Indigenous people in areas weren't represented. And this isn't just in the US and Canada. This is all over the world. And most countries believe that water is something that is always there, always existent, and belongs to everybody. And that's a beautiful way to view things, but it's not very accurate. Water, especially usable water by man so far, is relatively scarce. And so therefore there's more and more fighting and battling on who gets to use water for what.